Paper Made, what's going on? What's going on, buddy?
Hey, I'm glad to be here. What's going on with you?
Nothing, chilling, man. I'm feeling good, living life. I got a lot of sun today. I went to the gym. My knee is burning a little bit, but you know, that burn just means you're alive. That's what I mean. So praise God. So I'm happy about that. What's going on with you?
And something like I'm loving the weather right now. It is for me, definitely for me. I'm tired of the winter feeling, the chills and everything. I'm getting the nice bright sun. I'm feeling warm. That's what and the best part, when the sun is hitting me, like the skin is just glowing. Look at that. You don't see no dark spots, but acne marks what? Acne marks what?
I see. Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, so one thing about being at the gym, they had like this stretching cage thing. I don't know what you call it. But I liked it because you could do like every stretch imaginable, like on your body and stuff. You could stretch out the lower middle spine muscle and stuff. So most gyms don't have that. And I liked it because it reminded me of the gym at my school when I went to grad school. I went to Drexel and they had that cage too. So ever since then, I was looking for gyms that had that stretch cage, and this one has it. So I'm gonna try to go there a lot. And another thing that's reminded me of Drexel was, you know, I had a friend over there, I had a good homie. We've been friends for 10 years, almost 10 years going on now. And I'm really excited because he's actually on the show today. All right. Some heavy hitters out here, all right? All right, cool. So let's start the show, and we're going to introduce our special guest, my homie, Mr. Dr. Burks.
Black Hypothesis. Hey everybody, this is V. Langston Jules
and Paper Made,
and we are
Black Hypothesis, STEM for the culture.
All right, so we got with us Dr. Burks. Everybody give him a shout out. Dr. Burks, what up?
What's happening? Paper Made, Langston Jules. I'm happy to be here. Thank y'all for having me. I'm excited to do the show with you all today and, you know, talk a little bit about the things that I love and just my background and how I came to be Dr. Burks.
Right, definitely. Yeah, so what I was saying was, we've known each other for a while. I was actually trying to get you on the show for a while, but you're a busy dude, man. You're hard to get track of, man. Like every time I'm like, yo, come get on my show. I'm doing this STEM podcast. Yeah, you know, I'm working on this big project right now with the government. Oh, okay, what project you working on? Oh, I can't really tell you, you know, so always on doing some secret stuff. So I'm glad we caught you in between projects, man. Definitely. So we met at Drexel 10 years ago. We were young kids, you know, still just learning, trying to get our degrees, get our education, try to be to where we're at. So that's how I met you. But since then, I feel like we still got to get some catching up to do. Because like I said, you a busy man. So what you been up to, Dr. Burks? Tell us like where you're from, how you got here today. What got you to this Dr. Burks status right now?
Yeah. I'll give you a little bit about my background. So I'm a simple guy. I'm from Louisiana, born and raised there. I went to undergrad at a HBCU, you know, the glorious Grambling State University. There I studied physics. You know, it's interesting. I got recruited out of high school to come study physics. You know, I didn't know a lot about the program, but the department head was like, hey, come on, I'm gonna take care of you. We're gonna teach you some new stuff. And I was like, sure, take me away. I came from this small high school. We had like a graduating class of like 30 people. So it was pretty small. And I just going into college was like a brand new experience for me. So I went in, studied physics, and got introduced to like chemistry, fell in love with chemistry, and was like a class away from a double major. But anyway, it's like a minor in chemistry and a bachelor's degree in physics. And it was my first introduction to this field called material science and engineering. And so I used to do these summer experiences every summer. And I saw these people working with these carbon nanotubes, these cool little nanoparticles. I was like, yeah, this is the field I want to go into. And then I started looking around for grad schools that had this material science program. And this is where I ran up on Drexel. And this cool Asian professor, you know, Dr. Lee, he was like, yeah, I want you to come here and study with me. And I was like, I'm about that. I'm coming. I'm on my way. And, you know, that was the beginning of like a new journey. You know, grad school was the best time of my life, and we get into those things a little bit later in this interview. But yeah, I studied there for a couple years, did material science and engineering, got my master's, Ph.D. in engineering. And then, you know, while I was there, I did a lot of teaching and a lot of mentoring of young students. And I got introduced to STEM education and how STEM and education kind of coincide with engineering and the things that I was doing in this research lab. And then I met this lady who worked at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. And so she was heavy. She's an engineer, bioengineer, and she does heavy STEM education research. And she was like, yo, come over here and do some postdoc work with me. So I came over right after I graduated, hit the road with my family, jumped in the car, you know, ended up at University of Illinois, studied 2 years in engineering education, published some papers there, did some cool work. And then as of recently, within the last year, I transitioned back to material science and engineering, where I am now, a postdoctoral research associate. I work with the Beckman Institute at the University of Illinois. I do some cool work. We'll talk about the projects later. And ended up working or joining on with the startup company while I was here at University of Illinois. And this is where I am now. So I'm part with a startup company and then part-time with this postdoctoral fellow in engineering.
There's a movie Flubber with Robin Williams, R.I.P. I was really sad about that. Yeah, but Robin Williams, that movie Flubber, he made this material that was like alive and kind of goopy, and it was a crazy movie. So if you saw that movie, I guess we just want to know, like, how close are we to, you know, the walking around with some flubbers in our pockets and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah, that's a great question, and Flubber's a tough one. You know, I've seen the movie, and you know, I love Robin Williams. That was one of my favorite actors back in the Gap. I think first and foremost, just from a science perspective, Flubber, you know, to get a real life Flubber is going to be a tough bar to jump over. I mean, Flubber is it's an intriguing character in the sense that it's like breaking all the laws of physics. You know, law of conservation of energy does not, you know, account for Flubber. So, you know, you touch it and it just takes off and like it gets more and more speed. I don't know, unless the earth changes to where gravity and things are different. I doubt we can ever replicate that. And I think Flubber even had feelings to some degree. It's like he had emotions. Oh my gosh, to have AI, and we talk about this actually frequently with artificial intelligence, and, you know, a couple of mainstream scientists bring it up in podcasts and things, but you know, we worry about aliens or technology taking over, but the reality is, like, unless we program this artificial intelligence to be intelligent or to do some things, it'd be difficult for them to really, really go on and have this complex array of emotions beyond, you know, our human control. So I think having a pocket Flubber, though it would be cool, and I would probably buy one myself, or I'd be the scientist, I would already just have it. But other than that, you know, I think we're pretty far off from a real Flubber. I want to add this. I think the movie Flubber is interesting in the sense that I think with modern science, I think it kind of does, to some degree, a disservice to science. I think it's cool because it sparks imagination and creativity. But I think one of the issues that we have in modern science is that, you know, attracting new people to the scientific space. And so when you watch this movie Flubber, I think the imagery that it kind of places around what a scientist is, what a scientist does, and how a scientist should look, you know, I think it can be kind of misguided at times. You know, I think, you know, Robin Williams is stuck in this basement. You know, he has no social skills. You know, he's so aloof. He doesn't care. He misses deadlines. Like, you know, if I'm a kid growing up, you know, I see this, I'm like, man, if I'm gonna be a scientist, I gotta be kind of like this guy, you know. I don't think that's always an accurate or fair representation, you know, of what science is and how diverse science is and how you can bring your own personality and flavor and culture into the scientific space, and you can dress cool and you can have a family and you can have a social life while still inventing these cool things along the way. So no Flubber pocket, but scientists also do more and look different than Robin Williams.
I know, that's a fact. And that's really why we started this show, to like use that exposure and let people know, listen, you know, because usually you have to see things before you can visualize it for yourself. So I feel like what we do, I like what we're doing here, and I hope we have a lot more guests like yourself as well, so you can show people, listen, you don't need to look like Einstein, look like you got electrified with your hair, looking dirty and grungy in the basement and stuff. with the pocket pens and all that stuff. You don't need to have that type of look, that type of demeanor. You know what I mean? You just need to have that curiosity for whatever discipline that's involved in STEM. You know what I mean? So that's why I think it's really good that we're doing this, and I'm glad that you're on the show. And but going back to grad school. So you got your doctorate. You talked about what you're doing now, and you're doing your postdoc right now. But like I said, it was a while ago I met you. So let's, for some context, how long would you say it takes to get a doctorate degree? And you can start from wherever point for reference. But how long would you say it takes a person to get your PhD?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it varies so much, right? Depending on the person's background, depending on the person's productivity when they get there, and depending on the school. And, grad school, I think what a lot of people don't realize, it can be kind of isolating compared to undergrad, right? You go to classes, you have this community of people. But in grad school, particularly in the doctorate, in STEM, you have your research advisor who kind of walks you through becoming a doctor and trains you up and hits you with the tough questions when you need to have tough questions and the tough love when you need it and gives you the praise when you need it. And so every individual experience can vary so much, right? Depending on that relationship and the unique project that you work on and the milestones that you have to meet. However, I would say a safe kind of timeline for attaining a PhD coming from bachelor's degree, anywhere from, so the typical bracket is like 4 to 8 years, but you rarely see anybody finish in the 4 and you rarely see anybody take 8. So it's usually like around that 5 to 7, and all that varies depending on all those other factors. Funding is an issue. Sometimes money runs short, like, oh, we got funding for like 1 or 2 years. We need to speed up a little bit. And you might get a little fire under you and go a little faster or whatever. Or you might just be a rock star and publish, 15 papers or something, which is absurd, just so you know. Publish 15 papers in doctoral study, and then they like, listen, we want you to come out now. And like, you might have a job lined up. So, and that might put you out in like 4 or 5 years. But that's what I would say, 4 to 8, but then 5 to 7 is realistic and reasonable.
The money. We want to know about the money. I'm talking, all right? Who's going to pay for this? 7, 8 years. I don't got 7, 8. I don't got the money for that. How do we get that? How do we get that going?
Yo, you know what? I hear that a lot. When I was an undergrad, it was like, I'm like, this undergrad is expensive. How am I going to pay for something else? Like for another, I'm hanging on by a thread as is financially. How am I going to pay for this grad school for another, like, you can't even tell me how long it's going to take me to finish, but I got to keep paying for it. You might keep me in school longer to charge me more. So how am I going to pay for, grad school? It's a very common question. And I think there are a lot of perpetuated misconceptions about funding grad school, particularly in STEM. So if I give you all just a little background, a little historical background, say about, 15, 20 years ago, the United States got together and said, hey, we're starting to fall behind other countries as far as our competitiveness in the sciences and STEM fields. And, technology in a way has been a marker for national and international progression. There was this big race at one point to see who can get to the moon first, and like who can go out and into outer space and do these things, and the creation of NASA to kind of fund that effort. So US wants to be number one or top of everything. And so they realized a couple of decades ago that, hey, we're falling behind. And the only way we're going to get back up in the competitive space is start to fund the training of more scientists. And so with that came a pool of money, a lot of money, just a concerted effort to get more people trained. Because of that, there's a lot of programs. So most STEM programs, when you get to the doctorate level, they pay for everything. They give you this thing called a fellowship, a graduate fellowship. It can be a research fellowship or a teaching fellowship. It can be a research assistant or a teaching assistant, or some independent funding. And then they give you this funding to do research and to do your degree. So it includes the tuition costs, It gives you a living stipend every month, and they pay for all your insurance and things like that. So as a grad student, I never had to pay for anything to go to grad school. So it was a lot cheaper than undergrad. Actually, it was a lot better than undergrad because, I used to do research in undergrad, and, the checks every month might have been like, I don't know, $400 or something. But then you get to grad school and it's just like almost a livable wage. And it was just like so much better. So not only am I getting everything paid for, by these external entities, it also gives you a little bit more money than what you would have probably had in undergrad. So yeah, STEM, grad school, yeah, they cover everything. They cover everything. And a lot of times, a lot of programs won't even admit you if they don't have funding ready for you. Once you get through all their loops of acceptance and application, a lot of times they will find funding, whether it comes from the university itself or from some external source. They'll find some funding to make sure that you're covered on all those expenses while you're in school. And so the financial burden and the financial worry is pretty minimal as a doctoral student. It's a little different for master's students, but for doctoral students, it's pretty minimal.
That's the money part we got taken out. I feel like that was the most important. But also, which is important is that once you got the bag, once you got that secured, and you have the curiosity and you have the ambition to want to go into STEM, there's still a lot of things I imagine that a lot of people just don't know. You know what I mean? Especially you could be the first in your family to try to do something like this. You may be a minority or, someone that's not represented as much. So I feel like, are there any mentors or teachers that you think that would be beneficial to you? And if so, like, have you experienced that in your life? And if you could elaborate on that a lot more. Yeah,
you bring up some very real issues and hurdles to obtaining this degree. I'm first generation myself, college student, first doctor in the family, the whole nine. And so a lot of the things I'm going through, my family just couldn't relate, like, oh, you're doing great, keep it up, and you love it, you need the support. However, sometimes the problems are like a little deeper. You just need something more specific to kind of help you get over it. And so for me, mentors, the instructors, everybody plays a huge role in, that personal professional development that you undergo as a grad student. So, I have tons of them, and I'll go so far as to say mentors in general are super important. You might have a spiritual mentor. Like one person doesn't have to be every mentor for you. So you can have tons of mentors. And so I have someone I talk to about my spirituality. I have somebody I talk to about, my finances and investing. So I got different mentors for education. I got mentors for business. And so all these networks of people, they work together to kind of fill in any of those questions and gaps, that I may have while I'm going through whatever I'm going through. And I'd also add, as a grad student, this thing comes up. A lot of times we get admitted into places and this feeling overtakes us, what they call imposter syndrome. It's like, oh man, I made it here, but I'm looking at all these smart people around me. I feel like I don't fit here. And like, how do I continue to navigate this space, around these people who I may or may not relate to? And this is where I would add the importance of community. And I think this is where, me and Langston Jules kind of came in, having this community of people around you who are going through something just like you and who you can relate to on a personal level. And you can just vent or let out any of these things that you're going through. And a lot of times when you realize that other people are going through similar things as you, or, had, the same type of issue at one point, a lot of times that gives you just enough motivation or energy to continue to push through whatever you're going through. And, as long as Langston Jules don't quit, Dr. Burks ain't gonna quit. We just keep on going, So having a community that you can go to, whether it be an organization on campus, a church group, a community group, any kind of group that you can assimilate with, really has a tremendous benefit in just giving you that extra push you need, to continue to move forward in whatever you're studying.
No, that's definitely a fact. I feel like, some people, they'll probably just give up just because, they feel like isolated, like you say, no one's really trying to show the ropes or anything like that. And when you really feel like you're out there and alone, some people really just need that extra motivation, that extra support. So I definitely feel you on that. All right. So honestly, I remember, I think I went to your lab once or twice, but like, all right, so maybe you could tell us what was the typical day for a scientist? Now that you probably in a lab right now, it look like you got some reanimation going on back there, some government stuff. I don't know, but what's the typical day for a scientist, would you say?
Yeah. Let's see. So typical day, we can kind of start with a 9 to 5, right? You go in 9, you clock out at 5. So like, we'll start that as like the base of a typical day. You go into the lab, let's say it's a Monday, you plan out all the experiments that you want to accomplish that week. You might have experimental plans. You draw them up. You might walk up to the lab, make sure you got all the materials that you need to run given experiment. And then you do like, you meet up with all your colleagues and you make sure that you got enough time and space to do the things that you need to do and make sure other people aren't overlapping in the space during the time that you need to be there. You go through safety checks to make sure everything in your experimental plan is safety sound. And then you go in the lab at some point and you do whatever experiment it is you need to do. And then you leave, you got these new samples, this new thing that you've created, you got it made, you got it in hand, you got your new flubber, and you take that flubber with you. You go to some instrument somewhere on campus, and then you test it, right? You do some type of characterization of that new material, and you collect some type of data. And you know me, I do a lot of microscopy, electron microscopy, thermal analysis, things like that, and X-ray analysis. So you do whatever experiment is necessary to answer whatever question you had formulated. You get all this data, then you take it back to your office. You spend some time just looking at this piece of paper with all these numbers on it, make a couple of plots, and then you have to figure out, are there patterns in the things that I'm looking at? Is there something I can glean or learn from this new acquisition of data from this new material that nobody else has? And can I use this to answer or ask better questions going forward? So you do this whole psychoanalysis of like this data that you have, and hopefully you ask some better questions. And if you did a good job, or if you have some profound results and findings, what you do is you spend some time writing it all up into like a research report, and you submit it to some international journal so all the scientists in the world can look at you and say, oh, that's fascinating. I'm glad he taught us this new thing because I didn't know about this before he did that experiment. And so like the job in general entails, this whole scientific process, right? The scientific method to determine or to figure out answers to these questions that nobody else is working on. So that's a typical day. And then I think the cool part about being an academic, on the academic side of this, is like, if we start with that base 9 to 5, like sometimes you have to get trained to work on new instruments, like some instruments you've never seen before, like, it might be this new fancy microscope. I'm like, whoa, that's cool. I want to learn that. So we have professionals who will train us on how to do things, and that takes hours and weeks and to figure that out. And then so that's a part of the time commitment that you have, learning new things and then figuring out how to apply it to whatever you're working on. And and so with that 9 to 5, there's flex in the sense that some days, you might be able to finish your work in the lab from 9 to 12 and do some other stuff at home from 12 to 5 or whatever. Or you might even stay a little later because the training may have run from 3 to 7 instead of 3 to 5. And so there's always this flex. And another cool thing is being on a university campus with other researchers, there's a lot of research happening here. Everybody has a question, everybody wants an answer, and everybody's sharing instruments to figure these things out. So there's a little it's not competition, but it's a little competition, for time. Like, let's say if I want to use this microscope, I can't use it 24 hours or let's say 9 hours at a time because other people want to also use it. So we have to go on and schedule the time. And so if the whole schedule is full for a week and I need to do my experiment, I may have to schedule some time from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. to get in there when nobody else is in there, just to get in and do my experiment. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to wait 2 or 3 weeks, before I have to get some data that I need to continue my research. So the time part of it can be flexible in that way, which makes it really cool. But you can kind of say it's kind of like a base 9 to 5.
I just had a vision of like you in the lab and you like cheating on the time, and Sheldon from Big Bang Theory is outside of the pop game. It's 5:01, and you said you'd have the electron microscoper by 5:05 by 5 o'clock. What's going on, gang?
Yo, it's really like that though. It's really happened like that.
Sheldon's over there.
I've seen it happen like that, just like that. People are serious about those blocks of time. Like you need to be done like 15 to 20 minutes before your time so you can smoothly move out because the next person is move out of the way. It's my turn. Right. So it's interesting. It's interesting dynamic.
That's wild, son. Bunch of researchers scrapping in the hallway because one of them held an instrument for too long. Yeah, I'd love to see that, son. So I got a few more questions. I don't like how you be saying all these big words so casually in conversation. And I'm just going like, and I know what you're saying. So I got to backtrack, all right? And hopefully I'm backtracking for other people too, all right? Carbon nanotubes, what is that? An electron microscopy. I think that's what you said. What is that? Those are the two things you got to go back and, just smooth it out for comprehension. What are those two things?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's see which one we want to start with. Okay, let's start with the nanotubes so they're both related. Actually, this is great. So nano is a unit of measure. It's 10 to the minus 9 meters. So it's very, very small. So nano means we're looking at things on the nano level. And so a carbon nanotube is a specific arrangement of carbon atoms in a sheet. So if you take a bunch of carbons and you link them side by side in the X and Y directions, you get a flat sheet of carbon, and they align in this lattice that has these pentagons and hexagon sections in them. Mm-hmm. And so they align in the sheet. But then what happens is when you roll this sheet up, you get a tube. And so this is a tube constructed of all carbons. You can oxidize it, and then it can have some oxygens on it, but you can reduce it. Anyway, there's some chemistry you can do with this tube. But anyway, just for the base, you have a tube of carbons. And for scientists, we found out very long time ago that this particular material is extremely interesting for science. It has some extremely amazing, outstanding. So anybody's interested, I would definitely encourage you to look it up. It has some outstanding properties when it comes to mechanical strength, electrical conductivity, thermal conductivity, things like that. So the problem is they're really, really small, and it's hard to get those properties to be able to be used at the macro level, at the human level. Because, a lot of factors when you start mixing materials together, it's not like you just get a pile of nanotubes and then like throw them on something. You would usually have to incorporate them into some other kind of matrix and then use it that way. So there are a lot of issues when trying to go from all these cool properties at the nano level and getting them to work at the human level. And so a lot of people study carbon nanotubes and trying to incorporate them and get these properties to work. If we get anywhere close, like achieve the actual properties of carbon nanotubes at the bulk scale, it would just be groundbreaking and just phenomenal for a lot of different applications, So you can definitely check that out to learn more about the applications of carbon nanotubes. But the other part of that is electron microscopy. They're very related because we can't view these carbon nanotubes without the appropriate tools. And so one of those tools that we use to actually see carbon nanotubes, and this is what we had to use to confirm that they even exist in the first place, is electron microscopy. So you can have a typical optical microscope, where you look through it at wavelengths of light that we see here. And that's kind of the viewing mechanism. But then with electron microscopy, you have to take electrons and shoot them at the sample. And then you get a contrast based on the electron density in that sample. And so we use these electrons. So this becomes the resolution. So typically, wavelengths of light, like a couple of 100 nanometers. And that sets the resolution limit of what you're trying to view is based on what you're viewing them with. So let's see, I can give you a good example. the smaller the object, the smaller the object that you're hitting something with means the smaller object that you can view, right? So, okay, here we go. Here's an example. So if you wanted to probe your hand, you can take your finger and just kind of probe it, and you can tell like exactly where the edge is. You can tell all the contours of the hand just using your finger. However, if you use maybe your elbow, you might not have as easy of a time making out the contours in the center because the elbow is bigger than the spaces that you're trying to look at. And so by empowering us to use electrons as the viewing source, now the resolution at which we can view things is only limited by the size of the electron. Now viewing things very, very small is still very complicated because it's a lot of perturbations and a lot of things that can go wrong or that are happening at the nano scale that can interfere with these electrons that you're trying to view with. But when done correctly, you can view very, very small things using electrons. And that's kind of the essence of electron microscopy. So there are lots of different types of electron microscopy, and I won't go into all of that. But you can scan things and you can transmit electrons through things, requiring things to be very, very thin. And if you scan things, you can just kind of bounce electrons off the surface and collect the data that way. So that's kind of the crux of electron microscopy and carbon nanotubes. Does that get you? Does that pull you along?
Yo, I feel like I pulled too far. No. One question. You tell me if it makes sense or not. Let's say you're shooting something with an electron, and I guess it bounces back, or you're reading something that gets bounced back. I imagine there's like energy gets absorbed when it first hits before it bounces back. So my question is, do you think that the levels that you're reading are going to be different depending on where it hits? So I'm imagining like with your hand, it's almost like you'll be tracing your hand. Almost. And what you see, so the energy that would bounce back is going to be less if it hits your hand than if it didn't hit your hand. Almost to a point where it looks like an outline of your hand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, to some degree. So there's some techniques that we use, right? And so what we're talking about now is these are like pretty complicated techniques in microscopy at this point. So what we're talking about now is obtaining optimal contrast for a sample. So when you hit things with electrons, you don't always get a perfect image back. So sometimes you have to process samples in such a way to make the situation optimal to get the best view of what you're trying to look at. For example, with scattering, you can have what we call beam damage happens, right? So if too much of that energy is absorbed by the sample, you get heat that's generated. And what happens is it begins to warp the sample, and you can just basically burn straight through that sample with too much heat energy. So a lot of bio-based materials have a lot of problems with this absorption of energy and electron beam burn. So what we do, for example, with bio-based materials, something we do before we even put it in the microscope is sputter. We'll sputter coat it, which means we will basically use a plasma plume of metal and coat the surface of the sample with that plasma plume. And so what you get is a couple of nanometers thick surface of some metal on the surface of that biological material. And so what this allows for is better conductivity of the sample. So therefore the energy of the electron won't be directly absorbed. You get more electrons scattered back, and better conductivity, which will reduce the likelihood of burning the sample. And so this interaction between the sample and the substrate, the base of the sample, this is a very important thing, and these are questions that we have to address in microscopy all the time. And this is particularly for scanning electron microscopy. It's a little different mechanism for transmission electron microscopy, where you want to go through the sample.
Okay. All right, cool. Could you tell us about a project that you're working on now, or that you worked on previously, to kind of give us an idea? Because you talked about these instruments and the application of them, but like what is an actual project? Like what's an example of a problem that you're looking for the answer for?
All right. So what am I working on? So I could tell you about my most recent
one from the past.
I can tell you about the most recent one I joined on here at University of Illinois. So cool fact, insects, bugs, they have very intriguing nano features and nano characteristics, let's put it that way. So some insects have nano features on their cuticle, which is like the skeleton or exoskeleton of bugs, right? And so if you zoom in on a microscope, you can see very fine features. It may be like little heels. You might see, patterns, triangles. You might see all kinds of cool shapes when you look really close onto the surface of like an insect. And so a lot of these nano patterns play a huge role in how these insects live their lives. Whether it be, for example, if you're say a cicada and your primary food source is like sugar, sap from like a plant. Mm-hmm. If you're a very, very small cicada, if you're not careful, you can basically be eating your food source and then basically get stuck to that food source. And then you just die because you can't get out. Now, this is where these nano pattern surfaces and nano structures come into play. So now you have a nano surface, and this nano surface gives you hydrophobicity, which means, water.
You're scared of water or something.
It's scared of water, right? Yeah. Water doesn't like to be on you. And so what this allows is now that you're eating this sugary source, you won't stick to the food source. And so you can escape safely and you can eat what you want to eat and go about your life. So these nano pattern surfaces, or when it rains, you don't just flatten out and get stuck to the bark or something. So these nano pattern surfaces are really, really cool. Now, to take it a step further, some scientists have found that some bugs, some species of cicadas actually produce nanomaterials inside of their gut. And then they excrete these nanomaterials out through their hindgut, and then they cover themselves with this nanomaterial. Now, this is unique because, like I said before, a lot of insects already have nano patterns as a part of their exoskeleton. It's a natural thing. Mm-hmm. This particular species of cicada, or these species of cicada, they don't have these nano patterns. And so as a substitute, they create their own nanomaterials and basically create a false exoskeleton that has a nanostructure. And this nanostructure does similar things. And so the project that I'm currently working on investigates this class of cicada that produce this nanomaterial inside their gut. And so a part of it is, how do we extract these nanomaterials from this insect so that we can collect enough of it so that we can study it and learn more about the material itself, and what role does it play for this particular insect. And so this nanomaterial, actually, to give you an idea, it's kind of like a soccer ball. It's really, really interesting. It's only about 300, 400 nanometers in diameter, but it's like a soccer ball. It has the soccer ball patterns. It's a hollow sphere. But the question is, for us as engineers, is like, how did this insect make it in the first place? What is it made of? And then how does this particular material give this bug all these cool properties? So this material gives these cicadas hydrophobic properties. It also gives it some ability to be camouflaged, which is a really, really cool application for us as humans. So the question is, how can we learn from this cicada about making this particular material, but then how can we take those methods and synthetically produce these same type of materials for human consumption and for human use? And that's kind of the gist of like that particular project. And I'll go on to say too, like, working with insects and cicadas, I don't know nothing about bugs, but I'm an engineer, so I can break down whatever I get and whatever I extract. And so because I don't have an expertise in cicadas, you got to think about it. I mean, where do we even get these cicadas from? Like, I'm not out there with a net like SpongeBob, trying to catch cicadas. So like a tremendous part of like the projects, particularly this one, is like working with a team of people who have different expertise than myself. And so I work with a team of entomologists who go out into the field and they're experts in all these bugs, and they know all these names and families and phylums and species and all that. They go out there in the field and they collect thousands and thousands of cicadas, and they just pass them to me in a vial, and then I have to extract these nanomaterials. But on this project, I work with entomologists, I work with chemists, I work with physicists, I work with computational like scientists who do like modeling of things on computers and tell us what the results should be. We work with all kinds of people contribute to this type of work. Evolutionary biologists who want to understand how do these materials evolve over time, and are there cross mixing between plants and animals and like sharing of microbes. And so this project is huge. And I think a huge part of science in general is like bringing these diverse interests and expertise together to solve very, very complex questions and complex problems. So yeah, this is a cool project. This is what I'm into right now.
I'm gonna get chilling with the cicadas. All right, cool. No, definitely. I'll be interested to see. I don't know if you'll be publishing anything soon or anything like that. But if I know we could probably keep going on for more, but I know you're a busy man. All right. I know you probably got your instruments probably done and behind you somewhere, and somebody's waiting on it. So we're gonna let you go. But we first want to know if anyone is interested in what you said, they have more questions that they want to ask you, where can they reach out to you? And if you have a platform or anything like that, where can people continue to connect with you?
Yeah, great question. If you want to learn more about, the company, the startup company, the things we do there, you can reach our company website, frostdefense.com. If you want to reach me directly, you can check out my blog at educatetheswag.com. And, there I have a lot of cool articles about, grad school and intersections of science and culture. And you can reach me there if you just shoot me a link. I love to interact. Just shoot me a link, ask a question on an article. I get back to you and respond there. So if you want to reach me, just check out the blog and send me a message on the blog, and we can definitely have a dialogue. So educatetheswag.com, frostdefense.com. That's me, Dr. Burks.
That's what's up, Doc. This is dope, man. Thanks for pulling up. All right, so everybody, I heard the assignment. All right, educate the swag. Hit my boy up on that blog. Ask him questions if you want, or just go check out his articles. Frostdefense.com. Make sure you watch Flubber. R.I.P. to Robin Williams. All right, if you don't know, if you've never heard of that movie, you're doing yourself a disservice. All right, make sure you get Disney Plus and you watch Flubber. What's the other thing? Oh yeah, electron microscopy. You have to use that in a sentence this week. So y'all got some things to do, some things to work on, but definitely hit us up on Instagram, or also watch the video on YouTube, like, subscribe, share, definitely show us love. So Dr. Burks, it's a pleasure. We got a link definitely real soon, hopefully sooner than later. And appreciate you for coming on the show, bro. That's love. What's up?
All right, thank y'all for having me. Take care.
All right, dope. Later.
Black Hypothesis. Hey everybody, this is B. Langston Jules.
And Paper May.
And we are
Black Hypothesis, STEM for the culture.